the rhythm, catching every beat. Together we embrace the futures at our feet. The futures at our feet.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Edufuturists podcast. We are absolutely delighted to be with you in September. As we're recording this, we don't normally reveal that, but obviously this is a back to school one, reviewing everything that we've done. Loads of people have been back in that classroom, and we wanted to celebrate beginning of the year. We're going to review some of the brilliant podcast guests we've had on over the last few weeks and months, and we've got a little bit of news, haven't we, Steve?
We have, yeah. Normally we talk about ourselves, but we're not interested in that. We have announced, and you will have seen if you get our newsletter, that we are bringing the Uprising 2026 back to the north of England. We are in Liverpool on the 25th of June 2026 at the Invisible Wind Factory. The capacity is massive. We are super excited. And the crazy, absolutely bonkers bit that blew us away is we announced partnership opportunities, and within 30 minutes, 30 minutes, our two headline sponsors were taken, as were hospitality and many, many individual awards as well. We are blown away by you as the audience, by the people that are in the community in terms of the newsletter, and all of the partners that come back year in year or new to us and just keep backing us. We said we need backing to go bigger, and we got it pretty quickly, didn't we, Ben? It was, I can't believe it, mate.
And it's class. And I think we'll take this moment, because I think it's worth taking a moment, that we, as two Northern lads, wanted to do something. A few people got behind it, and I've got behind it since the beginning. There's many of those people who have been with us since 2016, since we started doing this, and have supported stuff since we've done events and whatnot, and we're very, very grateful for that. And for him to come back and to say, yeah, we're in, and we'll support you, and we want to help you build that community. It's just incredible. As the community started to grow, as it's gone onto WhatsApp, and if you're not in our WhatsApp community, feel free to reach out to us, and you can join that and be part of that community newsletter. And then obviously big thing on the awards. But yeah, Liverpool, 25th of June. And the cool thing about that is that, like you mentioned there, Steve, that the capacity is massive, because it's not about like sell loads of tickets. Anybody who came last year will tell you they got a really good deal for what they got in terms of swag and food and all that kind of stuff. We don't do it to make any money. We do it because we want to make an impression, and we want to build a community. And this community really matters to us, of people that are trying to do education a little bit differently, that are trying to push that envelope. And then those businesses and organizations that are also trying to do that. It's not just the individuals, it's not just the schools and the colleges. There's businesses that are in that space and saying we can do something different. We don't have to wait to be told that it has to be done like this. It doesn't mean that we're going to smash it all up. We're not them people. We do say revolution a lot, but we acknowledge that revolution is going to be a bit messy. And so we need to care about the people that are involved in that. And that's what this is about. It's about celebrating those people as well. So we are absolutely buzzing. The link for getting your tickets will probably, by the time this goes out, all the super early bird tickets will have gone, but the early bird tickets will be out. We're keeping the price as low as we can to get as many of you there. And we're hoping that there'll be 400, maybe 500 people there, Steve, in the north of England celebrating that, and we'll see. We'll hope to see many of you there. So yeah, I think we've been on a call just before we're recording this, so that's why if you look a bit flush and we look a bit excited, it's just like this is it. People are like backing this and trying to make it go somewhere, so we're excited. So we are going to bask in that moment. We're going to enjoy that, and we wanted to tell you as the listeners, wherever you are listening in the world, come and join us, come and be part of it. If you can make it, we're giving you as much notice. It's about 300 days, less than 300 days now until that event. Get it booked in, get your schools to pay for it if you can. And if you can't and you're struggling, reach out to us and we'll see if we can support as well. So yeah.
Absolutely. And I remember the last big thing, we've had many guests on, and we always talk about doing a review. We always forget our review, don't we, Ben? And it's not about reviewing the people that have been on. We always go, well, nobody wants to listen to us. And then we get all the amazing guests on and forget to put ours back in. So it's been a while, but the last time you'll have seen just me and Ben on was episode 300, where we did some reviews. We looked back at the previous 300 and the most recent ones that we talked about. So yeah, it's great, and we've had many great guests on from talking about tokenistic approaches to and how we need to be better in regards to approaches around diversity, opportunities, and how do we ensure that there's better botheredness comes up, obviously, caring approaches, leveling the playing field without growth, Ben, and all those different things come up. But where do we start? Which one do we go to first? Do we go right to the very beginning? Is it John?
Yeah, I think
Tom?
so. I think we got that. And I think it's worth shouting out here as well the great partnership we have with Crown House Publishing. Many of our guests, not all of them, but a good chunk of them, the team at Crown House say, we've got a new book coming out. We think this might align. Not all of them, but we've had some great opportunities to interview them. And our first person we're going to review here is a Crown House author. That's John Thompson. Some of you will know John, well known in the setting, and he came on July time somewhere, I don't know, whenever it was in the year, and he was talking about his episode was called This Much I Know, This Much I Know About, because he talks about that on his blog and whatnot. Interestingly, I think the key thing that jumped out for me from John's thing was that where he was talking about the challenge that we have with these knowledge-rich curriculum, and about, like, we're talking about we need to get so much stuff, and about this knowledge. And he unpicked a lot of that, and I think that was really exciting, a really interesting thought process of how we can perhaps rethink that piece.
Yeah, and we talked about, like, doing links to the work John had done in terms of like research ed and some of those spaces that he'd been in previously. Talked about some of the work that he'd done with previous people like Tom Sherrington, that we talked about in terms of like rainforest culture and all that kind of thing. So it was great. It was wonderful to have a different perspective rather than just. And I think this has been the biggest shift in the last 12 months, but even I'd say maybe 2 years, Ben, since we pushed on, that it's around the future of education, not just education technology. There's some great stuff happening in that space, but actually education is an holistic approach, and it's that purposeful stuff. We still get EdTech on. We still have many conversations and are involved in conferences around AI. We still speak at that. Ben's immersed in it massively, and we still explore it extensively, but there's so many caveats and so many different angles and approaches to education, and this whole thing of creating more space rather than stuffing the curriculum with more and more things is really important, because ultimately what that means is by creating space, it gives opportunities where priorities can be put in. So teachers often say that they can't do this because they don't have time. Actually, you create that space, and don't focus about just the content and loads of different subject knowledge that people just forget and don't ever use again, that actually you can then bring into real world context and actually what a curriculum that's up to date and is now rather than yesteryear.
Absolutely. And the books that we were talking about really were about teachers, weren't they? Who go beyond this is what knowledge is, and I've got to get through this stuff. I know a good friend Bob Harrison talks about you don't deliver teaching, and every time I hear that phrase, like I'm delivering a session, I'm delivering a keynote, Bob's voice goes in my mind, and basically like, you don't deliver, like you deliver food, you deliver parcels, you don't deliver content. And he talks about actually in the books those what makes a really great secondary teacher, what makes a really great primary teacher. And if you think about, like, we've all got examples, and many of us will be able to go back and think about incredible teachers that we had that, yes, they knew their subject, yes, they were good at that, yes, they got good results, but there was something more than that. There was and you hinted at it. I know that it's from a different book and different guy. It ties back to that botheredness that Howell talked about, wasn't it? And Howell Roberts, who's a good friend of us, and we're looking forward to catching up with him very soon. But this idea around giving a shit, which is what really matters, isn't it?
And I think it's really interesting because John talks about the fact that all of these teachers are unique, whether primary and secondary, early years, whatever the subject, and there's multiple examples he gives, but ultimately they have this unique similarity in regards to caring, opportunities, ability to coach, regardless of which sector they're in, primary or secondary. And I think that's the bit where he pulls out the similarities. Clear there's differences, but ultimately similarities, and ultimately what stands out in both contexts as a great teacher. And it isn't just the ability to deliver knowledge.
Absolutely.
And impart knowledge.
And that theme kind of came into the next one as well. And it was a totally different, like, context, because Tom Hooper in episode 302 in the US context, and he was talking about tutoring, but he actually talked about this idea about a third space and this idea of how we think about tutoring and what that might look like, particularly in that age of AI. So yes, it talks about what a really great teacher looks like, but now we're thinking about, well, what does a really great tutor look like, and do we need both? Are they different? How do they land together?
Yeah, we explored how parents' mindsets and young people's mindsets is to actually been supported and mentored um by an AI agent and an AI bot rather than an individual. But it talks about scalability, and it's something that ultimately education is, and AI in education is very diversive and polarizing, that people have an opinion of it's going to take jobs. But ultimately, the realization is we don't have enough teachers to really educate the young people that we've got now, enough of them. So ultimately, creating those spaces so we can scale education quicker, AI really will fill those gaps. If you can hear the dog snoring, by the way, then that's just Rosie's just wanting to play a part.
Yeah, I love it.
So
At least she's not barking and going crazy at the postman.
she was 2 minutes ago. She's already eaten the mail today. I don't even know what's been delivered for the last 5 days. She just eats it every single time. It's definitely not checks. It's probably something I owe, so I can ignore them anyway. That's all right. But yeah, I think it's really, really key. And we also challenged that conversation with Tom, that ultimately he'd been in a space where he'd run the tutoring with humans. He'd then run with AI, but also we asked questions and prompted, all right, brilliant. But what happens if there is no exams? How does tutoring play a part? How does it? And I think actually the response is pretty good. And he talked about the fact that what better to navigate the complexities of that change, because humans find it difficult. As much as they want change, nobody wants to change. AI doesn't have that. The ability to change the system when the system changes, and it will have to change to respond to where there isn't just this one size fits all of and an exam factory. AI is the best way to do it, because ultimately it doesn't have any preconceived ideas and misconceptions and bias towards what should have been. It's easier changed.
Yeah, and I think that's really interesting there about that exam factory piece, is that my big thing, and I know that I talked about this when I was talking about schools being ideas factories rather than exam factories, and I think that that principle, that are we perpetuating something by just rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic, as we've said a few times, is we're just like polishing a turd? Like, is that what we're doing by creating these systems? And I don't think that's what Tom was saying at all, and I don't think we came to that conclusion at all. I think there will be a space for it, but there's also tied to that is about that idea about equity. And I know that I'm going to jump over a few episodes to come to this, but when we talk about equity, when it comes to tutoring, equity and fairness, and awareness of bias into that space was a theme that came up in episode 305 with Ian Timbrell. And Ian's written a book, hasn't he, called More Than Flags and Rainbows, which I love that as a book title. I thought it's class, because when it comes to equity and when it comes to inclusion and diversity, much of it is tokenistic, and we're just polishing stuff, and let's wear a nice lanyard, and let's wear a nice, let's put a flag out, and that makes us inclusive and having equity. Absolutely doesn't, does it?
I think he gave some really, really good examples. One of those was an organisation that he didn't name, where he ultimately said, "Come in, we're doing some wonderful things." But actually, when he spoke to the young people and said, "What's it like to come out and as gay in this school?" and go, "No, you don't do that in this school. It's not. That wouldn't be okay." Those examples of actually what does it mean, and it links into some of the trends that we've been discussing for probably a couple of years in regards to culture. That it isn't a strategy to have, and it shouldn't be a strategy to do these things. Actually, you need to change the culture. Otherwise, the strategy, whatever the strategy is there, and people adhere to it, but ultimately, do they believe in it? Do they live and breathe it? Do they really actually do it? And ultimately, that was what Ian was pushing all the time, that ultimately the culture has to change. And he was saying, if you have to do it school by school, organisation by organisation, it will take a lot of time and it's a lot of hard work. But ultimately, what we want to create is wonderful individual schools that get it right based on the context of their organisation, rather than actually just a sheep dip approach and everybody does exactly the same thing, because ultimately you're just going to be getting flags and rainbows.
Of course, and that's going to then just perpetuate that. He talks about that schools being places where people feel safe, secure, and seen, don't they? And I think all those things that many of us take for granted, and that's the challenge here. I think sometimes we're consciously aware of this as old white men. Well, I say old. Steve's really old. I'm not as old as him, but we know that our bias and our privilege all sits into that space. So how do we make sure that everybody feels seen, everybody feels supported, and everybody feels safe? And the really good thing about that episode and the book that Ian's written around it that we've had the chance to read is it's saying we know that it can be too easy to be tokenistic, it can be a tick box, and we do that, and then when we've covered that box, actually it's a framework. He gives us a framework and some ideas of these are the things you can do. This is how you can make people feel seen. This is how you can make people feel safe. These are ways to make things feel supported in that space. And I think it's all well and good us raging and saying this isn't good enough. When somebody comes out and goes, this is what you could do, you go, well, that's off to you then. That you're going beyond just a token, aren't you?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And let's
And
jump back
interestingly
to...
about rainbows, is that where you're going to go? We're going to go
No,
with rainbows?
go do it.
Well, because actually the episode with Leonie Briggs, episode 303, her book is called More Than Rainbows. I'm sure it is, or it's something to do with rainbows. It's about STEM. I feel bad now that I don't know what it's called. Let me just check because I feel like I should say that properly.
Are you sure you're not getting confused with Ian's book that we've just been talking about? Are you getting confused again? You're saying I'm older.
No. I tell you why. A book's called Make Your Own Rainbow. I knew I was right.
No,
a book's called Make Your Own Rainbow.
He's lying, everybody, to try and cover it up. If you read the book,
it's called Make Your Own Rainbow. Check it if you want.
Yeah,
and the front cover's got rainbows on it. And
I just want to see you panic. I just want to see you panic. I couldn't remember it.
I properly panicked.
But I think it was really, the conversation with Leonie was really, really good because ultimately it started out with me saying, we talked about like examples because in the summer holidays you see loads of examples and you have dad or mum or parent guilt of, you see these wonderful people and I go, I've done some portions today with the kids. That's what I've done. And ultimately I've made portions with the kids and ultimately I'm not going to show you the portions. They ain't rainbows. There's little jars spilt everywhere, everything else. But you've got these parents that are making go-karts out of stuff in the car, in the garage and all that kind of thing. But actually, and I started out the conversation with that, and Leona's like, what we talk about here is simplicity, bringing STEAM into home life, into every part of the curriculum, but actually not making it difficult. That it actually, you're thinking too much detail in regards to actually, you don't have to be building rocket ships and all this other stuff. What you're trying to do is thinking about it in engineering and all this kind of thing in a real simple form and creative and linking it to real world context of football. And my 3-year-old loves football and going out to the park and thinking, oh, what does that look like? And I was like, brilliant, because it brought it home to me as a parent. And I think the book is a real good strong point in regards to that, of making it achievable for all, I think.
Yeah, agreed. And it's that, and it's tied to the idea that if you're a teacher and you wanted to create engaging learning experiences, here's some ideas. And like Leonie talked about her experiences in veterinary practice and how she's pulled that into education. But also, like you said, for parents, for grandparents, for child, wherever you are, when you're engaging with young people, how do you make that engaging and make it connect to something they care about? I think that's been the theme, isn't it? There's been a theme there about finding things that young people are interested in and then helping that so they feel seen, then they can support what they want to do, whether that's from an equity and inclusion perspective or actually whether it's from a learning perspective, which I think's a really cool little space in there. And the title of that was Make It Real. So if you want to, rather than having an abstract idea around science or technology, engineering, like abstract over here, make it real, make it linked to something that they care about. And time back to what John talked about, this idea of, hold on a minute, the great teachers managed to tie things together, didn't they? Make you go, hold on a minute, you're thinking about, I'm not saying I was one of the great teachers, but if I'm guessing that none of my ex-students ever listened to this podcast, but if they did, they'll probably remember a lesson I did about the greatest conceivable biscuit. And it was like, I remember it like it was yesterday when we were talking about Anselm's concept of the greatest concept in philosophy, and we linked it to biscuits, and kids just went, they all brought biscuits in, and we talked about ranking biscuits. About that's cool. That makes it real, doesn't it?
why did my lessons types of badminton shots? Why were I delivering that and you were doing that? Styles, I was coaching, and
Maybe that's
fair.
why I was fat for as long as I was.
you were bringing biscuits in, and I was teaching badminton.
Doing badminton.
And I was doing badminton and coaching and all that kind of stuff. But no, it was really, really good. And I think the Amaze Lab stuff that Leonie and the family are doing is really, really great. And I think if you're looking to step into that, whether you're a parent or a teacher, and think, how do I bring those kinds of different inspiring contextual ideas into the classroom in any organisation or any home, that's where you need to start. And I think Leonie also and the Maze Labs also runs community events and workshops in the community and for parents and all that kind of thing. So reach out and head in there, and maybe we'll put the link into the show notes. Or you know what we will? Head to 303 and it's in the show notes there. So
yep.
You don't just stay this
Good
one.
move, Steve.
Good move. Go to 303, listen to it, and then link into the, I'm going to say link into the show notes, link into the show notes and go to Maze Labs and everything else. And the next one, I'm not even going to try and do a jump in and everything else, is a really interesting conversation, 304, with Professor Andy Hargreaves. And it is a conversation that I know you've mentioned quite a few times in regards to attendance and engagement, and that whole thing of actually disengagement and people, what was the whole, I'm just trying to think, in regards to the presence is not the alternative.
I've got it written down here, Steve.
Go on,
do it.
Yeah, come on, save me.
The opposite of absence. The opposite of absence isn't attendance; it's presence.
That's it. That is it. Exactly. I'm glad that I wrote it down and passed it over to you earlier, and you've just translated it. But yeah, that whole thing of we spend so much time in education monitoring and counting and saying attendance is the be all and end all, but actually, you might have children and even adults in any day, not just education, in work. That it used to drive me mad as a leader when people used to go, "Look at that person! They've been in 7 this morning, 7 o'clock at night, and they're never off." And I'm like, brilliant. But I don't know what they've been doing. If I just counted them being present in terms of attendance as a measure, their output could be absolutely horrific. And if we judge that based on real life situations in terms of work, not just turning up, actually the output that you put and did exactly the same in education, I think we'd be doing different. I think we demonstrate that actually attendance is a real cover up of engagement. Learners,
a million percent.
9 o'clock lessons. How many kids are engaging?
Yeah.
And I'm not.
And this is
the best teacher in the world. That is just. Yeah, sorry, Ben. But it's just
even tied into a room, isn't it? Like, you think many of us will have been teaching classes and we think, oh, this is good, we're teaching really well. And the students are there in body, but they're not there. Their mind's elsewhere. And you have that like stereotypical kids looking out of a window. But actually, even if they're not physically looking out of a window, their minds are on Roblox.
That's why you need to trace their eyes all the time, Ben. Track and trace or whatever it was, that whole thing that
is that what Dan used to talk about? Dan used to talk about that, didn't he?
Doug
when he used to be
Lemov,
Doug Lemov.
What was that thing that you used to talk about? You used to trace. Everybody needs to be looking at me. Everybody needs to be focused on the teacher.
All eyes on me is what it was called. All eyes on me.
Like, this strategy, and I was like, I'd never heard it before, because obviously I was in FE, and I know that, and I was like, absolutely not. I was like, what are you talking about? He's like, all eyes on me. We need to make sure every single moment, every single learner's eyes. And I was like, I get it, but again, I've been looking at something. Engine's on, nobody's behind wheel. That's not a mechanism, making sure that they're staring at you. Come on, stare at me, and you're learning. Well, I'm not being funny, but
I'd love to interview Doug Lemov, actually, by the way, just because I think it'd be quite interesting, because he has written a new book called Building School Culture, and it's called Reconnect. The book's called Reconnect, for meaning, purpose and belonging.
We're going to go off. We're going to get absolutely hammered for this. Remember when COVID happened and he talked about teach online like a champion? Remember that? Didn't he bring one out? Teach online like a champion. I was like, what, you're getting them to trace their eyes and stare at you through a screen? Like, come on, mate. And to be fair, the book is, take my hat off to him. The book is a bestseller, has done millions of copies. I'm not disproving and trying to go against everything else. What I'm saying is that concept of it doesn't show engagement. If you make a lesson and if a learner's facing away from you and they're engaged in an activity with a group and they've got their head down learning, well, not being funny, but they're engaged in the lesson, but you can't see their eyes. That's what I'm trying to say. Ultimately, they're head down, they're learning, doing all that kind of thing. Come on. And I know I'm probably taking out context. People say, you've been daft. It's only when you're talking. But learning is a very different concept to really just sitting there and watching and looking at the front of a classroom. And I think it was great to talk about and that. And Andy had some very different perspectives to us.
Of course,
And
yeah.
comes from a very different space, and that is welcomed. We've got some people guests coming on. We aren't just saying we want to listen, only push our own stuff and ignore the rest, but actually some synergies. There were some great conversations, even though there was some challenge, some great conversations with Andy that actually we said, we disagree with that. And Andy disagreed with mindfulness. And we were like, well, actually, we champion mindfulness, and it's great. Positive conflict is fine. It's okay to disagree on things. The world has become where I can't like Andy anymore because he said that and I disagree with him. Absolutely, that's fine, as long as you can back it up. Not everybody's going to agree on everything and have the same opinion. That's absolutely fine. And it was great to explore those kind of things because we've had Naomi, who is in that space. We've had Claire Tamplin in that space. Some great people. I disagree with that, but actually, I agree with what he's saying in terms of the engagement over attendance stuff.
100%. And I think that's really cool, that tension of not having to agree on everything. I love what you've said there. I think that's really important. The other good thing about Andy that wins him over is he's from Accrington, isn't he? So
yeah, well,
that was a win. He doesn't live in Accrington now. He's moved over to Canada.
Well, the first 5 minutes, literally go to episode 3 or 4. If we're getting it right, 3 or 4, and listen to the first maybe 5 minutes where he tells the story of his journey, how he got to Canada, where he started out. It's a really interesting listen, actually, in terms of the backstory. And he goes through everything, and he's like, what an interesting life Andy's led, and like I say, really well studied, really well researched, and understands the subject as he talks about it. So he's not just somebody who's just a flash in the pan. He has been in that space for such a long period of time, and he's doing great work with ministries, not just Canada, but globally now, which is great to see.
For sure. That takes us to episode 3 or 6, and the title of this one landed when this book landed in our inbox. We were like, yep, we want to talk about this. And obviously we had Matt Bromley on previously with our friend Andy Griffith, and they talked about the working classroom, talking about how class makes an interesting challenge in education. How can we address that from an equity perspective in terms of social class, because it gets forgotten about. And what does social mobility look like? Is that a good thing? But Matt talks about, and he's the first in a series of books, and the first book's called Why School Doesn't Work for Every Child. And I thought, well, that lands for us as a title, that lands for us as Edufuturists, because it doesn't. And we have a one-size-fits-all curriculum, and we've said it multiple times that one-size-fits-all means one-size-fits-none. And Matt Bromley talked again here, obviously addressed some of those elements there. Attendance came up again, behaviours came up again, community came up in that conversation, the ABC of how do we make school work more fairly for more people, and how do we address that? So that was a great conversation because Matt's doing some cool stuff in the space. Again, got some different perspective to us around attendance and behaviours and what that might look like from a community and technology perspective. But it was a good conversation, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that framework's really, really helpful. I think the book, like all of the stuff Matt's written, is really, really well to understand. And I think it's all rooted in Matt's real passion and values around working class and those opportunities in terms of raising the bar and ultimately access to education for all. So that's been about for such a long period of time. And I think we've lost sight of it because ultimately there was a period of time where we were putting kids in booths and off-rolling and getting rid of people because Ofsted was pushing the agenda so much that that people were just saying, if these kids are naughty and if they're attending and they're a nightmare, let's just send them home and let's get them home. Just absolutely madness. Like, that we have such an issue and the NEET, and as they used to be called, the disengaged children, the variation in regards to opportunities, understanding neurodiversity. We often, and we've announced now that our trends and our uprising for next year is the pick and mix. Pick and mix education is so diverse and so varied that actually it's okay saying that online education doesn't work and all these other things. And Matt's book is focused on in the classroom solution, in the building solutions. But ultimately, it's so diverse that ultimately that one size fits all is one size fits none. And actually, Matt is right. schools don't work for every child. That is the biggest challenge.
But I think the premise of what his book is around how do we make school work for more children, which is absolutely, let's tick that. We agree that. I think what we added on to that conversation is, like we're talking about in terms of pick and mix, that we aren't ever going to be in a position where it's going to be fit for everybody, and therefore there will still be an unheard third. There'll be a forgotten space. There'll be a group of that, and that comes up in a future episode. We're talking about that, which is exciting. But I think one of the things that sits with me there around the community piece that he talked about was about it takes a village. Interestingly, I saw a brilliant piece, and it might be interesting where I'm going to go here. I saw a brilliant piece on Instagram from our I say our, he's in the north, Mr. P, ICT Mr. P, Lee Parkinson, who I've had opportunity to speak to and listen to his keynotes recently as well, actually. But he talked about how Jeremy Hunt. Well, no, was it Jeremy Hunt? It was one of the Tory people who's gone out and said about how all these mental health diagnoses. Have a check it out. I'll see if I can find that link to what to Lee's post in there. And he absolutely unpicks. Okay, everybody's mourning about the mental health crisis, and there's so many people getting diagnosed. And actually, it might just be that kids are having a tough time, and they're just not acknowledging it, and we're too soft, and this and the other. And he talked about how much stuff has been taken out, got rid of. Sure Start. We absolutely decimated LCAS and all the mental health for young people CAMS service. We removed youth clubs, we removed all these things, and actually, and whether it's right or wrong, lots of the community organisations that held the things together, the Scouts, the Brownies, the Boys Brigade, the churches, the youth club, they have less and less impact in our society now. So therefore, the community piece, how do we bring schools and community together closer, is probably a really important thing that we perhaps don't talk about enough on the podcast.
I agree. I think we unpicked it. We talked about isolation. We talked about ultimately a lot of parents and a lot of young people that we don't understand the reason why they're not. We don't unpick that, and I know it's a future episode, but we don't unpick why people are not attending. We just treat it as repeat offenders and all those kind of things. And ultimately, if you didn't attend previously when I was growing up, and you went out of your house, or you went to a space where you could be seen by somebody in your street or somebody in your village, your parents would know. Absolutely. But if I was to go out into my street and my estate, I wouldn't know the kids, and I've just moved here. But ultimately, is it exactly the same where they would be, or is society completely changed? So we just ignore it and say it's not our problem anymore. But it is our problem, because ultimately these young children need an education. I'm not saying they need to go into school. I disagree in terms of that, but they need the education. They need a positive education, because ultimately it's to shape them up, get diverse thought and different ideas and rebel ideas into their heads, meet different people outside of that little cluster, but also to learn some bits that you'll never use again. School's so important for that. Formulas and equations and all that other stuff. But just
don't get me on that. Don't get me on that.
But you know what I'm saying? Like, ultimately, if you went, maybe your village, Ben, because I know that Accrington and around your area is quite connected. But I think in so many communities now, kids truant, and so what? Nothing's done. Nothing supported to get them there. It's the parents' responsibility, and the parents are bad, and it's their fault and everything else. It just wouldn't be the same when I went to school, and it's not that many years ago.
No. I definitely hear that, and I think like you're right about it being quite well connected in this area, but still, like you've got neighbours that you don't know, and you don't leave your kids out in the same way. My mum and dad used to leave the front doors open back in the day, and bikes to be able to be in front yard and nobody would steal it. I'm not saying we need to talk back to that, but I think we do need to come back to the idea of community. And a development of a community, and that we're responsible for each other, and it's not a dog eat dog. I maybe I'm being a bit too controversial by saying this, but I think a lot of that stemmed from performance tables everywhere, making everything a judgment, everything a litigation, everything a league table, a competition. Perhaps we've missed the boat there. I suppose the last one for this review is episode 307, which was out recently with Jeremy Samways. Jeremy is the founder of Your Tomorrow, which is designed to help young people think about AI literacy, which obviously many of us who are listening to this, many of me and Steve particularly, have been in that space talking about AI for a long time, but also that idea about how do we develop literacy of using AI, when to use it, when not to use it, what does it mean, how does it use it, and about we titled this one "Why AI Literacy is More Than Prompt Craft." It's not just about can you get a really good prompt into ChatGPT, for example, is it?
No, and I think I was discussing that the other day. Remember when prompt engineer was everything, Ben? I think we did a workshop on the ability to there'll be AI prompt engineers and all this kind of thing. I'm like, but the machine became so much better, quicker that literally I can just type my normal self and not have to spag myself, and it understands, and the response and the ability for it to generate based on that is key. So ultimately, we need to then focus on what literacy is beyond AI literacy is beyond just a prompt, all of those different details. And it was great, a different angle to look at it from a student perspective, a young person's perspective. But we did challenge and say, well, ultimately there has to be a connect between educators because if educators are still nervous and young people are pushing towards it, there's so many stats out there that the number of young people that are using AI, they need to be better literate, like they need to be probably more technology and mobile phone literate. They don't know everything just because they use technology. All of those kind of things is so important, isn't it? But ultimately, educators need to meet them in the middle, not just a strategy that's written that's standalone outside AI strategy. I'm sure everybody's got one. 5 of them.
Yeah, and they're only worth as much as what they were written on last week, aren't they? They're out of date anyway. The strategy is one thing, policy is another thing, culture is the big thing, isn't it? And actually then tie that to being literate. And we actually talked about what does it mean to be literate as a human being? How do you function and communicate? And interestingly, I had a conversation with a pal out in. He's out in Abu Dhabi, and they were talking about how they were working with I don't want to give too much away, but basically they were working with a very, very bright students who were doing amazing stuff when it came to technical stuff, and they were very, very competent. They just couldn't communicate, and I think this is the key bit when it comes to the AI space, is that that's only going to exacerbate the digital divide of those who can communicate and those who can't. Because if you can't know when to use it and when to communicate and how to use it and how to use it effectively, and then we're going to get left behind. And we've always talked about on the podcast how we want technology to be an enabler. We don't want it to be a divider. We've talked about how technology is a really good thing, but we need to, how do we make sure that we get it into the hands of more young people and make sure that they can use it? That's the challenge here, isn't it? I think with the AI literacy piece is about, we've got to tie that to the equity piece as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it was a great episode. I think we've had a real good million episodes since we last reviewed.
Yeah,
and we've got many
we've
more.
Got some cracking ones coming, haven't we?
It's really exciting. I cannot believe that we're booked up until, what is it, October and beyond now, like October, beyond. Yeah. And I think we just a couple more and we get to Christmas and we celebrate a Christmas episode with Christmas hats on and all that other stuff. It's bonkers.
I reckon we should do so. What should we do? Let's put that out to the community. Like, if you're listening to this and you've got all the way to the end, what should we do for Christmas? What do we pull people together? Does Christmas have to dress up as Steve? No, I was going to say, does Steve have to dress up as Father Christmas? If we manage to get, if we manage to sell 200 tickets, will Steve dye his beard white for December or something? I don't know.
Absolutely. If we have 200 tickets gone by our Christmas episode, I will dye my beard white temporarily for 1 hour.
There we go. Right, that is live, and he's going to sing a Gary Barlow song.
I won't sing Gary Barlow because I'm better than him at singing, and people will go, "Oh, turn off the radio." But I will dress as Father Christmas on the episode if that is what we
So
do.
there we go. That if that isn't a reason,
I can't believe
to
that we're
get your
recording the
tickets,
Christmas episode next week just to get away from it. So
what? Oh, since we've been recording, 200 tickets have already gone.
no, can't believe it. Can't believe it.
Love it.
But,
Love it.
But yeah, no, it's been a pleasure as always. I think,
Yeah.
as always, Andrew, if you've got ideas for who might be getting on, we work with publishing companies, we work with organisations that will connect us with guests. But our community, if you're listening and you think, I know somebody, I work with somebody, or I've used some technology, anything, or your approach that thinks about the future of education. Think about our trends. Think about the last few years of trends. Don't just think education, technology, and product. Think about thought leadership and the future of education as a whole. And we'd love to hear from you. Connect.
Yeah, and
drop us a
the
message
link
on
for
WhatsApp
that
and the
now
link-
is in the show notes as well. So suggest
Perfect.
a guest, where you can fill in a form to suggest a guest, and that comes into our inbox, and we can come from there. You can also do that on the website. So yeah, it's good. Make sure you listen back to all them episodes. Don't just take our word for it. Let us know how we can be part. And like Steve said, get involved with us at Uprise in 2026. We cannot wait, and we are hoping to have representation from all around the world, and we'll do some cool stuff. Thanks everybody for another episode of the Edufuturists podcast. See you soon, mate.
See you soon.